All right, folks, Brandon Chapman here. It's a Theo Night video. It's June 8th, 2021. On a period of time or a day where so little's happening in the market, there is so much going on. It's kind of like that duck that's sitting on the water with its feet just churning just below it. There's just so much happening right now. Specifically, we'll call it the squeeze. The short squeeze is back on. We'll take a look at that among other things in today's session. We look at the S&P, the futures were basically flat from yesterday's close. You'd think not much is going on. As you look across the sectors, it's a mixed board here with utilities down 0.8% and energy up 0.8%. And even within this kind of juxtaposition of utilities and energy, it doesn't really tell a great story or a complete story as we look at a couple of things going on in the utility space and energy. But there's been just a lot of bullish option activity over the last month in energy. And as you look at Forward/CL, oil prices continue to grind higher. I'm not super convinced that oil has much traction above 75. I mean, at some point, I think the fundamental factors of high oil prices will weigh. But right now, it's just such a position where oil prices are going to default to rising higher. This shows the curve for oil. So we're seeing falling prices as you move to forward contracts in the future. And what this tells you is the oil's in backwardation. It's kind of implying a shortage in the future. And so again, it's just this is not a condition where you expect oil to really start to break down. Once this begins to kind of flip up and turn this way, now we've got kind of a story for oil topping. And so for right now, it certainly looks like it's pretty bullish, generally speaking, for the energy sector. And that sector is, of course, up slightly on the week, but it's up today about almost 0.9% as a sector. As you kind of break within that, there's other varied components. But then on the utility side, we're out down 0.8. This is kind of an interesting thought that utilities would be down when you look at the bond market. The bond market, if you look at TNX, yields for 10-year Treasury note was down 0.4%. If you look at TYX, this is the 30-year, it was down 0.42. If you look at FVX, this is the 5-year Treasury yield, it was down 0.27 points. So what we saw today was the yield curve did flatten as 30-year outperformed 5-year and 10-year, which normally would benefit, things like, staples, and would normally benefit things like utilities, XLU, utilities. That's not exactly where we're at right now, but there are utilities companies that are performing relatively well. When you look at the S&P 500 as an index, the top performing stock today was NRG, and it is a utilities company. And with utilities, I mean, some have underperformed and some have outperformed. Companies like Southern, generally speaking, have done fairly well. Companies like EXC have generally done fairly well. But really at this stage, I think people are looking at utilities, but looking for value. Stocks like NRG, this is one we talked about a couple of weeks ago, is having unusual option activity. I have a top-down Friday watch list I put on. We put on VST. This is one that a little while ago, back here on the 28th. And it's gone from about 16 up to about 18 just in the last couple of weeks. So we saw the idea that the yield curve would flatten. As part of this, we're looking for utilities companies that should outperform. And for my thought process, I thought that these kind of utilities companies might do better. So it's not necessarily utilities are doing all that poorly. It's just that the top that are probably more overvalued are now underperforming. And so as we look at the S&P right now, you look at the VIX, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel down there at that floor of support, the lowest levels it's been in a year, over a year. As you look at VVIX, for example, we're flirting with 110 again, which is kind of a key point as things might begin to get a little more uncertain in the market. If we look at the SKU index, this is on a closing basis. So I'm going to bring up a line chart here. So again, it's not updated for today, but yesterday it ticked up to 151. This tells you there is significant tail risk to the market. Downside crash risk is very, very high right now, but there's also very little volatility, and there will be a tendency for the market to grind out a higher frequency of small up days, with that potential for crash risk developing in the background. As you look at front to back month volatility, this is a ratio. If I bring up the pairs ratio study here, and this is just a basic study that's, if you come up here, add study, you'll find in there. But anyway, we made it tick lower, but you'll notice we're at about 1.22 today. This is the yellow line, is a ratio of 3-month to 1-month volatility. We're still very elevated. The market's basically saying as you start to push out several weeks to months, the outlook for volatility is that we're expecting volatility to rise. And again, normally when you get these levels, usually within a few weeks, you see maybe a 5 to 10% decline in the market. It's not 100%, but hey, it's not bad either. All right, and okay, so let's take a look at the broader theme for today. And initially I didn't exactly fully grasp what was happening. I was thinking, hey, green cars, green technology, but now it's starting to come really to the fore. AMC was a stock that we were on early back here on the 24th, and it exploded higher. But this concept of short interest is rather intriguing. There's sites out there like, for example, highshortinterest.com. That gives you, it's the top short interest companies, right? Stuff that's over 20%. And as you start to go through this list, it's a source of a lot of option activity over the last couple of weeks. And Workhorse, again, is one I've talked about last Friday. And again, it's one that I've seen for a few weeks. I just haven't done a lot with. But now it's becoming more clear what's happening. call me a little dull, I don't know. But the point being is that we are seeing a resurgence. And it's interesting that this is happening. That basically you have the Reddit communities out there, scouring for short interest and assaulting these companies. Really, they're assaulting the shorts, which are probably pretty inane at this point, going back to these companies, back to these stocks, shorting the heck out of it again, and just failing at it, right? Yesterday we looked at, in one of my classes with CLOV, this was Clover Health. Yesterday's information showed a June 11 and July 13 upside calls being bought. Who knew? It was on the cusp of a major breakout today, major short squeeze, as Clovis has about 36% short. Clover has about 36% short interest. One today, Root, is another one. It has not moved yet, but today you saw upside calls bought for the July 1250. You're seeing nice upward volume. And after my class, things did begin to accelerate today. The last maybe 45 minutes as it shot up from about 1060 to close at around 1140 or 1131. And so again, I think this is one where there are a few names out there that might be attracting a lot of attention. Maybe this is one coming up with Root. And as you go down the list here, Bed Bath & Beyond today was another one that saw significant activity. It was the 11 June 40s. Siri is one that I had on my list to talk about last week. Talked about a class, but was one that was on seeing bullish interest today as well at the June 25 June 750 and the July 7 looking for upside here. Back here it was on I think it was on the 27th right here. Was the 650 strike, I believe. We look at FUV. This is one that had the June 1250 was bought last week on June 3rd. I had on my list to talk about. GoGo is another one we talked about here. GoGo. It was a June 3rd. On June 3rd, it was a June 16 strike price, showing more upside here. Again, these are all companies on the list. Smile Direct Club's another one that's experienced bullish activity, and today popped about 14.5% on June 2nd. Was a June 850 strike that was traded. PetMeds, one we talked about on the 28th, PTS, shot up here, and again, the 28th was back here, shot up and faded back down again. But PetMeds, again today, it's the June 45, so looking for maybe a retest of the prior high up here. Gosh, I stopped writing down the symbols as I was going down the list. Sorry about that, folks. But But as you go down and you have companies like, for example, Beyond Meat was one that saw a lot of interest. DGLY. So after pets here, yeah. So DGLY, 24% implied volatility. It was a 150 strike. So let's just come here. Let's look at DGLY. So just a number of companies. Again, Digital Ally up about 14% today, but it was the June maybe 4.5 strike. No, sorry, that wasn't the right one. Was, sorry, I should have wrote it down. I believe it was today's activity. But DGLY is another stock that's seen a lot of bullish option activity, and QS is one we've talked about as well. That is seen some activity, is not really moved quite yet. But on June 3rd, we talked about the 25 June 40 strike that was bought, and yesterday we talked about the June 37.50 strike that was bought. Again, looking for upside here. We set a target earlier in the week, or sorry, yesterday around 65. So as you go down a list like this, again, coupling high short interest and also unusual option activity. These are the names on this top of the list here, and these 20% and above short interest that are seeing unusual option activity over the last couple of weeks that we've talked about. So now I'm just kind of putting it together for this video. But again, here's a number of names on this list that have not exactly moved yet or moved significantly that could have substantially more upside. And we're doing this at the same time that you look at, for example, our trade balance is near a record. It was just reported today at 68.9 billion. And you look right here, the Jolt job openings, boy, over 9.29 million jobs open. It's the highest we have ever seen. People are not working. They've got stimulus, and they're kind of gambling right now, and gambling a lot of these stocks. They're squeezing the shorts, trying to make the next million, only to just give it away. But if you're looking for some kind of upside shots in some companies that might outpace the market dramatically, these are certainly some that are experiencing the powerful combination of unusual option activity and high short interest. Anyway, it's been a pleasure being with you today. Again, it's the TheoTrade video, June 8th.